The ship landed on the Sara Prime, just as the twin suns were setting. Commander Elias Vance stepped out onto the landing pad and took his first breath of alien air. It smelled like flowers and something else he could not name. The sky was purple and gold, and the city before him looked like it was made of glass and light. He had seen many worlds in his 38 years of life, but this one was different. This one was beautiful in a way that made his chest hurt. A tall figure waited for him at the edge of the landing pad. The Valkyrie was nearly 3 meters tall, with skin covered in scales that shifted colors like oil on water. 4 arms hung at its sides, each one ending in delicate fingers. Its face was long and elegant, with large eyes that seemed to hold the light of distant stars. "Commander Vance," the Valkyrie said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Thylas, captain of the Queen's Sworn Guard. Welcome to the Sara Prime." Elias nodded and kept his face calm. He had learned long ago that first impressions mattered, especially with species who had been traveling between stars while humans were still living in caves. "Thank you, Captain. I am honored to be here." Thylas studied him for a long moment. Elias knew what the alien saw. A human male of average height with short brown hair going gray at the temples. Scars on his hands and one on his jaw. Eyes that had seen too much death and had stopped being surprised by it. "You are smaller than I expected," Thylas said finally. "We usually are." The Valkyrie made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Come, her radiance wishes to meet you." They walked through the city, and Elias tried not to stare like a child at a carnival. The buildings rose around them like frozen music, all curves and spirals and impossible angles. Valkyrie moved through the streets in flowing robes of every color, their scales catching the light and throwing it back in rainbows. There were no vehicles that he could see, no machines, no noise. Just peace and beauty and silence. It made him uncomfortable in ways he could not explain. The palace sat at the heart of the city, a structure of crystal spires that reached toward the sky like fingers trying to touch the stars. Guards stood at every entrance. Tall Valkyrie in armor that looked more like art than protection. They carried weapons that Elias recognized as ceremonial staffs, beautiful things covered in gems and gold. Not a single practical weapon among them. He kept that thought to himself. The throne room was vast, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, soft and warm like sunlight through clouds. And at the far end, on a throne carved from a single piece of crystal, sat Queen Selithra. She was the most beautiful creature Elias had ever seen. Her scales were deep purple and silver, shifting through colors that had no names in any human language. Her 4 arms were folded gracefully in her lap, and her eyes held the wisdom of ages. A crown of living flowers rested on her head, blooming and dying and blooming again in an endless cycle. Elias dropped to one knee without being told. Some beings simply commanded respect. "Rise, Commander Vance," the Queen said. Her voice was like music, like water over stones, like thunder in the distance. "Let me look at you." He stood and met her gaze. He did not look away, even though part of him wanted to. 40 years, the Queen said softly. 40 years since your people came to the stars. Such a short time. Yet in that time, you have fought 17 wars, survived 3 attempted extinctions, and spread to over 200 worlds. She tilted her head, scales shifting to colors Elias could not read. "We have been among the stars for 12,000 years. We have not fought a single war in 10,000 of them. With respect, Your Radiance, that is why I am here." The Queen smiled. It was a strange expression on her alien face, but somehow warm. "Yes, that is why you are here." She stood, and even that simple movement was graceful beyond words. "Walk with me, Commander." They walked through gardens that existed inside the palace, places where plants from 1,000 worlds grew in impossible harmony. The queen moved slowly, her four hands sometimes reaching out to touch a flower or a leaf. "The Galactic Council has kept peace for 12,000 years, she said. When your people arrived, many were afraid. Humans carried something with them that the galaxy had forgotten. The memory of violence. The knowledge of war." She paused beside a pool of water that reflected stars that should not have been visible through the palace roof. "Some wanted to destroy you. Others wanted to contain you. But I was curious. Curious about what your radiance? About how a species so young, so fragile, so short-lived could survive such terrible things and still reach for the stars." She turned to face him, and her eyes held something that looked almost like hunger. "I wanted to understand what makes humans fight when running would be wiser. What makes them stand when falling would be easier. What makes them hope when hope is foolish?" Elias thought about her questions. He thought about the friends he had buried, the battles he had survived, the nights he had spent wondering why he kept going when so many others had stopped. "I do not know if I can answer that, Your Radiance." "Perhaps not with words," she agreed. "But you will stand with my sworn guard. You will watch and learn our ways. And perhaps in time, you will teach us yours." She reached out with one of her hands and touched his shoulder. Her fingers were cool and smooth, like polished stone. "Something is changing in the galaxy, Commander. I can feel it in the silence between the stars. Old things are stirring. Dark things. And when they come, I want to understand what your people know that we have forgotten." Elias looked into her ancient eyes and felt a chill run down his spine. He had read the intelligence reports. Ships vanishing on the outer rim. Colonies going silent. Signals from the void that should not exist. "I will do my best, Your Radiance. I know you will." She smiled again, and this time there was sadness in it. "That is what humans do, is it not? Your best, even when your best is not enough. Even when the odds are impossible. Even when the darkness is absolute." She turned back to the garden, her scales flickering with colors like a sunset dying. "I find that beautiful and terrible in equal measure." Elias had no answer for that. So he simply stood beside her in the silence, watching the impossible flowers bloom, and waited for the darkness she had promised. It would not make him wait long. 3 months passed on the Sara Prime. Elias learned the ways of the Velkari, their customs and their rituals, their beautiful and useless ways of fighting. He stood with the Sworn Guard outside the throne room for hours each day, watching them practice their combat forms like dancers performing for an empty theater. They were graceful. They were elegant. They were absolutely helpless. He tried to tell them. He tried to show them what real combat looked like, how an enemy would not wait for you to finish your form, how a blade aimed at your throat cared nothing for tradition. They listened politely. They nodded their long heads. And then they went back to their dancing. Only Captain Tylus seemed to understand. "You think we are fools," Tylus said one evening as they stood watch together. "I think you have been at peace for a very long time," Elias replied carefully. "The same thing, spoken gently." Tylus made the sound that passed for a Velkari laugh. "You are not wrong, Commander. We have forgotten things. Terrible things, perhaps, but necessary things." His scale shifted to a deep blue that Elias had learned meant sadness. "My grandfather's grandfather could not have imagined needing to fight. Peace was simply the way of things. Like breathing, like the sun's rising. Peace is not the natural state of the universe. So humans believe. But perhaps you are wrong. Perhaps violence is the disease, and you simply have not found the cure." Elias thought about the scars on his body, the friends who had died in his arms, the enemies he had killed, and the ones who had tried to kill him. "Perhaps," he said. "But until everyone finds that cure, someone has to remember how to fight." 2 weeks later, his words became prophecy thought the day began like any other. Elias was at his post outside the throne room, watching the sworn guard perform their morning rituals. The twin suns were high in the purple sky, and the crystal spires of the palace threw rainbows across the courtyard. Then the sky went dark. That happened so fast that Elias thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. One moment, the suns were shining. The next, a shadow had swallowed them whole. He looked up and felt his heart stop. A ship hung above the city. It was massive, larger than any vessel he had ever seen. A mountain of black metal, bristling with weapons. Its design was wrong somehow, built with angles that hurt to look at. Like something from a nightmare forced into reality. Alarms began to scream. The sworn guard broke formation, scales flickering with colors of panic and confusion. Elias grabbed Thylas by the arm. "What is that?" Thylas stared up at the ship, and his scales went completely white. Elias had never seen that color before, but he understood it immediately. It was the color of absolute terror. "The HFY," Thylas whispered. "They have returned. Who are the HFY?" But Thylas did not answer. He could not answer. He was shaking so badly that his armor rattled, and his eyes would not move from the ship that had blocked out the suns. Elias shook him hard. "Captain, I need information. 10,000 years." Thylas's voice was barely a breath. 10,000 years ago, the Council exiled them beyond the galactic rim. They were supposed to be gone, dead, forgotten. He finally looked at Elias, and there was madness in his eyes. "They are the reason we stopped fighting, Commander. They are the reason we made peace. Because violence created them, and violence could not destroy them." The first explosions hit the lower city. Elias watched buildings crumble, watched crystal spires that had stood for thousands of years shatter like glass, watched Velkari running through the streets in blind panic. The ship was launching smaller vessels now, pods that fell like black rain and crashed through rooftops. "They are landing troops," he said. "They are coming for the palace." Thylas made a sound that was not quite a word. "Captain." Elias grabbed him again, forcing him to focus. "Where is the queen?" "The throne room. She will not leave. She says a queen does not abandon her people." "Then we hold the throne room. Rally your guards. Set up defensive positions at every entrance. Move." Thylas stared at him as if he were speaking a foreign language. Then, slowly, something changed in his eyes. Not courage, exactly, but something close to it. A memory of what duty meant. "Yes, Commander." He straightened his back and began shouting orders. Elias ran to the armory. It was a beautiful room filled with weapons that had not been used in generations. Ceremonial swords covered in jewels. Staffs of gold and silver. Nothing practical. Nothing deadly. He found his plasma pistol where he had left it. The standard council-issue sidearm that was all he had been permitted to bring. 20 shots in the power cell. He had requested heavier weapons months ago. The request was still somewhere in the palace bureaucracy, gathering dust. 20 shots against an army. He checked the weapon, then checked it again. Then he went to find the queen. She was standing at the window of the throne room when he arrived, watching her city burn. Her scales were shifting through colors he had never seen before. Patterns that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her, from memories older than her civilization's peace. "They came for us once before," she said without turning around. "Did you know that, Commander?" "The HFY. They were born from our wars, from the violence we practiced before we learned better. They were soldiers once. Our soldiers. Modified, enhanced, bred for killing." She finally turned to face him, and her eyes were older than stars. "We created them, and when we could not control them, we tried to destroy them. We failed. So we exiled them to the dark between galaxies and prayed they would never return. Your radiance, we need to evacuate you. No, the palace is not secure. We cannot hold against. I said no, Commander. Her voice was gentle, but absolute. I will not flee while my people die. I will not hide while my world burns. She moved to her throne and sat down, her 4 hands folding in her lap. If the Kethvari want their queen, they will have to come and take her. Elias looked at this ancient creature, this being of peace and beauty who had never known violence, sitting on her crystal throne with the flames of her dying city reflected in her eyes. And he felt something he had not felt in a very long time: respect. Then I will stand with you, he said. She smiled, and it was the saddest smile he had ever seen. I know you will, Commander. That is why I asked for you. She reached out and touched his hand with her cool fingers. When the darkness comes, I wanted a human beside me. Because humans understand darkness, and they stand against it anyway. Outside, the sounds of battle grew closer. Screams and explosions and the terrible clicking. Sounds of things that should not exist. Elias checked his pistol one more time. 20 shots. It would have to be enough. Queen Selithra stood in the doorway of the throne room and watched her guards flee. She felt no anger toward them. How could she? They were her children, her people, creatures of peace and beauty who had never been made for violence. Asking them to fight the Kethvari was like asking flowers to fight a fire. They did what their nature demanded, and their nature demanded survival. Then she saw the human. Elias Vance had not moved. He stood alone in the corridor, his small weapon raised, facing 6 monsters that could tear him apart in seconds. His face showed no fear, no panic, no despair. It showed something else entirely, something she had read about in the old texts, but never truly understood. It showed resolve. The Queen had lived for 300 years. She had studied every species in the Galactic Council, learned their histories and their secrets and their souls. She had thought she understood humans. These strange, short-lived creatures who burned so bright and died so fast. She had understood nothing. The first Kethvari died with a hole in its eye cluster. Elias fired twice, and the plasma bolts punched through the creature's natural armor like it was paper. The Kethvari screamed, a sound like metal tearing, and collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. The others hesitated for a fraction of a second. Elias used that second. He moved forward, not back, closing the distance while they were still processing the death of their companion. His second shot took another Kethvari in the throat. His third went wide as the creatures finally reacted, scattering with inhuman speed. 4 left. 17 shots. The leader made a sound that was not quite words, and the remaining Kethvari attacked from all sides. What followed was not a battle. It was butchery in slow motion, a small, fragile human fighting against things that had been designed to kill. The Queen watched as Elias ducked under a blade that would have taken his head, watched him roll to avoid a second strike, watched him fire again and again while the monsters closed in around him. He killed a third Kethvari with a shot to its face. He wounded a fourth, sending it stumbling back with ichor pouring from its chest. Then they reached him. A blade caught his shoulder, spinning him around, sending blood spraying across the crystal walls. He did not stop. He kept firing, kept moving, kept fighting even as more wounds opened on his body. His pistol clicked empty. The Queen saw him look at the weapon for just a moment, saw something pass across his face that might have been disappointment. Then he dropped the pistol and pulled a knife from his belt, a small piece of metal that looked like a toy compared to the weapons of the Kethvari. He kept fighting. The Queen had seen many things in her long life. She had seen stars being born and worlds dying. She had seen the rise and fall of empires, the flowering of civilizations, the slow dance of the cosmos through time. She had never seen anything like this. Elias Vance, bleeding from a dozen wounds, faced 2 Kethvari warriors with nothing but a knife and his bare hands. He should have been dead 10 times over. Any sane creature would have surrendered, would have begged for mercy, would have done anything to make the pain stop. But humans, the Queen realized, were not sane. Not by the standards of the peaceful galaxy. Not by the standards of the standards of the peaceful galaxy. They were something else entirely. Elias buried his knife in the throat of the fourth HFY. The creature grabbed him with all 4 of its killing arms, lifting him off the ground, squeezing until bones cracked and blood poured from his mouth. But the knife was deep, and the HFY was dying, and it released him as it fell. 2 left. The wounded one had recovered, and it joined the leader as they circled the human who refused to die. Elias stood in the center of this circle. His left arm hung useless at his side. His face was covered in blood, some his own, some belonging to the creatures he had killed. He swayed on his feet, barely conscious, kept upright by nothing but will. The leader stopped in front of him. "Impressive," it said, and there was something almost like respect in its clicking voice. "For a soft thing, for a small thing, you have killed 4 of my warriors. This has not happened in a very long time." Elias spat blood at its feet. "Just getting started. No, you are finished. Your weapon is empty. Your body is broken. You have nothing left. I have enough. Enough for what?" Elias smiled. It was a terrible smile. The smile of a man who had made peace with death and found that death did not frighten him. "Enough to keep standing. That is all I need." The leader tilted its head. "Why? You cannot win. You cannot save your queen. You cannot even save yourself. Why do you keep fighting?" "Because that is what humans do. Explain." Elias laughed, and the laugh became a cough, and the cough brought up more blood. But when he spoke, his voice was clear. "Where I come from, we have a saying. It does not matter if you win or lose. It matters if you stand up when you get knocked down. It matters if you keep fighting when fighting is hopeless. It matters if you face the darkness, even when the darkness is going to swallow you whole." He looked the HFY leader in its many eyes. "You asked why I do not run. This is why. Because somewhere behind me is a queen who showed me kindness. Because somewhere in this galaxy are people I care about. Because if I run, I have to live knowing I ran. And I would rather die on my feet than live with that knowledge." The leader was silent for a long moment. "Your species is young," it said finally. "You have barely left your homeworld. You are weak and fragile and short-lived. Yet you fight like you have nothing to lose and everything to gain." It stepped closer until its face was inches from Elias's face. "We have conquered 1,000 species. We have broken civilizations that lasted for millions of years. None of them fought like you. Then you have never fought humans before. No, we have not." The leader raised its killing blade. "I think I am glad we finally have. You would have made worthy prey in the old times. You would have given us a good hunt." Elias did not close his eyes. He did not look away. He stared into the face of death and waited. The blade began to fall and then the queen spoke. The sworn guard gathered in the corridor outside the throne room. 12 of them, the best soldiers the Velkari had to offer. They stood in formation with their ceremonial staffs, their scales flickering with colors of fear and determination mixed together. Elias stood among them, the only human, the only one with a real weapon. He felt their eyes on him, felt their questions without hearing them. They were looking at him like children looking at an adult in a thunderstorm, hoping he knew what to do, hoping he could keep them safe. He could not promise them safety. He could not promise them anything. "The HFY have breached the lower levels," Thylas reported. His voice was steady now, but his scales still showed his fear. 3 kill teams, 18 warriors. They are moving toward the throne room. What do we know about them? Elias asked. Their weapons, their weaknesses, their tactics? They have no weaknesses. This came from another guard, a young Valkyrie whose name Elias did not know. They are perfect killers. They feel no pain, no fear, no mercy. They were designed to destroy, and that is all they know how to do. Everything has a weakness. Not the HFY. They killed billions in the old wars. They ate worlds. They nearly destroyed our entire species before we found a way to exile them. The young guard's voice was rising, his scales going pale. We cannot fight them. No one can fight them. We should run. We should take the queen and run. The evacuation routes are cut off, Tyler said quietly. They planned this well. They knew exactly where to strike, exactly how to trap us. He looked at Elias with something like hope in his eyes. What do humans do when there is no escape? Elias thought about the question. He thought about Kepler Station, where he had held a corridor for 6 hours against overwhelming odds while civilians escaped through the emergency pods. He thought about the Martian insurgency, where his squad had been surrounded for 3 days with no food, no water, no hope of rescue. He thought about every time in his life when running was not an option and fighting was suicide. We stand, he said. We make them pay for every step. We buy time for something to change, for help to arrive, for a miracle to happen. And if no miracle comes, we die on our feet instead of our knees. The Valkyrie stared at him. Some of their scales shifted to colors he did not recognize. Others went even paler. That is madness, the young guard whispered. Maybe, but it is also human. They heard the HFY before they saw them. The sound came from the eastern corridor, a heavy rhythm of footsteps mixed with clicking and scraping. It sounded like an army of insects made of metal, marching through the beautiful crystal halls, destroying everything in their path. Then the smell reached them. Blood and burning and something else. Something chemical and wrong. The smell of things that should not exist. Positions, Thylus ordered. His voice cracked, but he did not run. Remember your training. Remember your oaths. The sworn guard formed a line across the corridor, their ceremonial staffs raised like spears. Elias stood at the center, his pistol held ready. And then the HFY appeared. Elias had seen terrible things in his life. He had fought pirates and rebels and madmen. He had seen death in 100 different forms. He had never seen anything like the HFY. They were nightmares given flesh. 8 limbs each, 4 for walking and 4 for killing. Their bodies were covered in black armor that looked like chitin, natural protection that gleamed like oil in the palace lights. Their faces were all wrong. Too many eyes, too many teeth, mandibles that clicked and scraped together in a sound that was almost like laughter. There were 6 of them. 1 kill team. They stopped at the end of the corridor and studied the defenders with their too many eyes. The leader stepped forward. It was larger than the others, its armor scarred with marks that might have been decorations or wounds. When it spoke, the sound came from somewhere deep in its chest, translated by a device that turned its alien clicks into words. Valkyrie guards, it said. Soft things. Weak things. We remember you. It made that clicking laugh again. We remember how you taste. Thylus stepped forward. His scales had gone completely white, but his voice was steady. By my oath to the sovereignty, none shall pass while I draw breath. The HFY leader tilted its head, studying him like a cat studying a mouse. Brave words. Empty words. Your kind spoke brave words in the old times too. They tasted the same as the cowards. It raised one of its killing arms, a limb that ended in a blade of black chitin. Step aside. We want only your queen. Give her to us, and we will make your deaths quick. No. Then we will make them slow. The leader moved. Elias had trained his entire life for combat. He had reflexes that could track bullets, instincts honed by 100 battles. And he could not follow the HFY's movement. One moment, it was 10 meters away. The next, it was standing in front of Thylus, its blade buried in the captain's chest. Thylus looked down at the weapon in his body. He looked up at the creature that had killed him. His scales flickered through colors one last time, ending on something that might have been peace. Then he fell. The Sworn Guard watched their captain die. They watched the HFY pull its blade free with a wet sound. They watched it lick the blood from the chitin with a tongue that had too many parts. And they broke. Elias did not blame them. He had seen soldiers break before. Good soldiers. Brave soldiers who had simply reached the end of what their minds could accept. The Valkyrie had never known violence, never seen death, never faced anything that wanted to hurt them. And now they were watching their captain murdered by a monster from their oldest nightmares. They ran. They dropped their staffs and ran, pushing past each other, scales white with terror, screaming in their musical voices. One of them knocked into Elias as he fled, nearly sending him to the ground. In seconds, the corridor was empty. Just Elias and 6 HFY. The leader looked past him to the throne room door, then looked back at him. Its many eyes showed something that might have been curiosity. "You do not run, small thing." Elias raised his pistol. His hand was steady. His heart was calm. He had always known he would die in battle someday. Today seemed as good as any. "No," he said. "I do not run." "You cannot win. You know this." "Probably not. Then why do you stay?" Elias thought about the queen, sitting alone in her throne room, waiting for monsters to come and take her. He thought about all the people who had ever stood against impossible odds, who had fought when fighting was hopeless, who had refused to give up even when giving up was the smart thing to do. "Because someone has to," he said, and he pulled the trigger. The queen's voice cut through the violence like a blade made of light. "Enough." She stood in the doorway of the throne room, and she was no longer the gentle creature of peace that Elias had known. Her scales blazed with colors that hurt to look at, patterns that seemed to come from before time itself, from the age when the Valkyrie had been warriors instead of artists. Her forearms were spread wide, and her eyes burned with a fire that had been sleeping for 10,000 years. The HFY froze. Even the leader, with its blaze still raised above Elias's head, went completely still. "You come to my world," Queen Salithra said, and her voice was no longer wind chimes. It was thunder and earthquake and the roar of dying stars. "You burn my city. You slaughter my people. You invade my home." She stepped forward, each footstep echoing through the bloody corridor like the beat of a war drum. "And this creature, this human, stands alone against you while my own guards flee." The HFY leader lowered its blade. Its many eyes were focused on the queen now, and for the first time, Elias saw something in them that might have been uncertainty. "You have forgotten something, HFY," the queen continued. "You have forgotten why you were exiled. You have forgotten what created you. You have forgotten that we were not always gentle." She reached Elias and stood beside him, her hand touching his broken shoulder with a gentleness that made no sense in this moment of fury. "We made you. We made you because we were killers, because we were conquerors, because we were everything that we later chose to forget. And when you became more terrible than we could control, we did not destroy you. We could not destroy you. So we sent you away and we buried our weapons, and we told ourselves that peace was the only path." She looked down at Elias, at this small human who had fought impossible odds and refused to fall. Her scales shifted through colors that spoke of sorrow and shame and something that looked almost like awakening. But peace was a choice, and choices can be unmade. The queen raised her hands, and the palace responded. It started as a hum, deep in the crystal walls, a vibration that Elias felt in his bones. Then the lights changed, shifting from warm white to a red that looked like fresh blood. Panels slid open in the ceilings and walls, revealing things that had been hidden for thousands of years. Weapons, not the ceremonial staffs of the Sworn Guard. Real weapons. Ancient weapons. Devices that pulsed with energies the Galactic Council had outlawed 10,000 years ago. The HFY leader made a sound that was almost fear. The silence protocols. They were supposed to be destroyed. We lied. The Queen smiled, and it was the smile of a predator remembering what it meant to hunt. We told the Council we had destroyed all our weapons. We told them we had forgotten how to fight. We told them what they wanted to hear, because we had learned that sometimes survival requires deception. She raised one hand, and one of the ancient weapons floated down to rest in her palm. We knew you would return someday. We knew the exile would not last forever. So we prepared. We hid our true power. We waited. You cannot, the leader said. The weapons of the old war, they are too terrible. They will destroy your own people as easily as us. I know. The Queen's voice was sad but steady. I have spent 300 years hoping I would never have to use them. Hoping the old nightmares would stay buried. Hoping that peace would be enough. She looked at Elias again, at the human who had fought and bled and refused to surrender. But this human has reminded me of something I have forgotten. Sometimes peace is not enough. Sometimes someone has to stand against the darkness, even if standing means destruction. Even if standing means becoming the thing you fear. She aimed the weapon at the HFY. Leave my world. Take your ships and go back to the darkness between galaxies. This is your only warning. The leader hesitated. Elias could see it calculating, weighing odds, deciding whether the Queen was bluffing. The ancient weapons hummed in their housings, filling the corridor with a sound like a hungry god waking from sleep. This is not over, the leader said finally. We will return. We will bring 1,000 ships, 1,000,000 warriors. We will finish what we started in the old times. Perhaps, the Queen agreed. But today, you will leave. Today, you have learned that the galaxy is not as soft as you believed. Today, you have learned that even the most peaceful species can remember how to fight. She gestured toward Elias with her free hand. And today, you have learned something else. You have learned that the small creatures, the young species, the soft things you dismissed as weak, they are more dangerous than you ever imagined. Because they do not fight for logic. They do not fight for survival. They fight for something else. Something you cannot understand. What? The Queen smiled. Ask the human. He can explain it better than I can. The HFY leader turned its many eyes toward Elias. He was barely standing, held upright by the Queen's hand on his shoulder, more dead than alive. But his eyes were still fierce, still burning with the fire that had kept him fighting. It is called hope, Elias said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Hope that tomorrow will be better than today. Hope that the darkness will not last forever. Hope that somewhere, somehow, the good will win. He managed something that was almost a smile. You cannot kill hope. You cannot exile hope. You can only make it stronger. The HFY leader stared at him for a long moment. Then it made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else entirely. We will remember you, human. When we return, we will make sure to kill your kind first. You can try. The leader turned and walked away, followed by its remaining warrior. The sounds of their retreat echoed through the palace, through the burning city, through the world that had almost fallen. When they were gone, the Queen lowered her weapon and turned to catch Elias as he finally collapsed. Medical teams arrived within minutes, summoned by the Queen herself. They lifted Elias onto a stretcher, speaking in urgent musical voices about blood loss and broken bones and wounds that should have killed him hours ago. The Queen walked beside them, her hand never leaving his. "You should not have survived," she said softly. "No being should have survived what you endured." Elias opened his eyes, just barely. "Told you. That is what humans do. Yes, you told me." Her scales shifted to colors of warmth and gratitude and something deeper. "You told me, and I did not truly believe. I thought I understood humans. I was wrong." She leaned closer, her voice falling to a whisper. "You have taught my people something we forgot 10,000 years ago. You have taught us that peace is precious because someone is willing to fight for it. You have reminded us what it means to stand. Does that mean you will stop hiding your weapons?" The Queen was silent for a moment. "It means we will remember who we were. Not to become warriors again, but to remember that warriors are sometimes necessary." She smiled, and it was different from her earlier smiles. It was the smile of someone who had found something they had lost. "The Galactic Council will need to know that the Kethvari have returned. They will need to prepare for war. They will not want to hear that. No, they will not. But they will listen, because of you." She touched his face with her cool fingers. A single human, standing alone against 6 Kethvari. A single human, refusing to run when running was wisdom. The other species will hear this story. They will remember it. And when the time comes to choose between peace and survival, they will remember what you taught us. Elias closed his eyes. The darkness was calling to him, the deep sleep that his body desperately needed. But before he let it take him, he had one more question. "What did I teach you?" Queen Selithra looked at this strange, fragile, impossible creature who had changed everything by simply refusing to move. "You taught us that courage is not the absence of fear. You taught us that strength is not the power to destroy. You taught us that even the smallest being can change the course of history if they are willing to stand when everyone else runs." She paused, searching for words. "You taught us what it means to be human. And in doing so, you reminded us what it means to be alive." Elias smiled, just barely, and let the darkness take him. He woke 3 days later in a bed made of light and crystal, surrounded by flowers from 100 worlds. The Queen was waiting for him along with something else. A new uniform, new weapons, a new mission. "The Galactic Council has formed a mutual defense pact," she said. 12 species have already joined. More are coming every day. She handed him a medal, a crystal star that glowed with inner light. "They want you to lead the new united fleet. They say a human should be in charge, because humans understand what the rest of us have forgotten." Elias looked at the medal, then at the Queen, then at the window that showed a city slowly rebuilding itself. "I am not a leader," he said. "I am just a soldier. You are wrong." The Queen smiled. "You are exactly what the galaxy needs. A soldier who stands. A warrior who hopes. A human who reminds us all that the darkness can be fought." She touched his hand. "Will you accept?" Elias thought about the Kethvari, about the promise they had made to return. He thought about the peaceful species of the galaxy, beautiful creatures who had forgotten how to fight. He thought about his home, about Earth, about the billions of humans who had clawed their way to the